bien, moi je vais m'exprimer sur d'autres Sonderkommandos que les Sonderkommandos d'Auschwitz, qui sont probablement moins connus, mais aussi parce que ces faits sont plus méconnus, surtout en Europe occidentale. Il s'agit des Sonderkommandos de l'opération 1005, c'est-à-dire ces commandos spéciaux juifs, évidemment, qui ont été chargés de déterrer, d'abord de retrouver les fosses, mais ça, évidemment, les nazis en étaient informés parce qu'ils
digging out the bodies, the corpses, and this was reported by the Einsatzgruppen. And in the east there were a huge number of mass graves. They were full of corpses, and their task was to get rid of these corpses. A giant task, and as of the Operation Barbarossa, as of June 1941, that is when the German troops marched into the USSR. Well, after the four large army commandos are going to take over Group A, the Baltic countries, and then Group B, which is Ukraine, Group C being southern Ukraine, and Group D being Moscow. You have then 4 groups called Einsatzgruppen that are subdivided into a number of commandos whose mission is to smoke out, liquidate and execute the opponents to the Reich. That means politicians, resistance, but of course all Jews. And as of 1941, the execution of those people first was about men, but then it was also women and children. It shows you how fast these mass executions took place. It was a ruthless process that, and if you look at the winter 1941, the Einsatzgruppen every day sent reports and numbers representing those mass executions to the main office in Berlin, and the Jager reports in December 1941 reports the Baltic countries being totally Judenfrei, which means by December 41 the Baltic countries had no living Jews left. They had all been assassinated. This is what Karl Jager had written at the time. A very organized process from Estonia to the border of Romania. It's all very reasoned, organized, and by the spring 1942 it can be said that there are no Jews left in these territories, or some marginalized populations that are used as slaves and used to do the menial work. So what happened? It's very easy to describe. It starts in May 1942. One of the main commanders of the Sonderkommando, and I'm not talking about the Jewish Sonderkommandos, but it's worth stressing that the Einsatzgruppen were themselves divided in Sonderkommandos, so-called Sonderkommandos. So here, Mr. Goebel was the leader of the C group, so Jekyll and Rasch altogether organized the massive series of executions of the Kiev Jews. It's a mass murderer that then fall into alcoholism and into dementia. He therefore lost his position in the SS and was repatriated to Berlin, but then he was given a second chance to work as an SS and to work towards the SS ideal. So in spring 1942, Heydrich sends him to the trial of the Gestapo. or not in 1942, but he's sent to the trials, and there is a discussion. There is a report from what he said. I was given the task to remove any traces from the executions having happened there. I had to report to the police, to security, and to orally pass the order of Müller. And this was a secret mission. Absolute secrecy must be respected, and therefore no written documents could ever be produced. So Lobel then realizes how he can get rid of the corpses. So he goes to Chelmno, where a large number of corpses are expecting him there. And he's going to practice, if I may use this term, using a number of techniques, such as was mentioned by Philippe Ménard, the use of dynamite. This is where the rumors come from about dynamite on Jews. This is the actual thing that happened. So Global is going to try dynamite. He's going to try a number of layouts for the corpses to make sure they're burned quickly. He puts wooden logs between the corpses. He uses mills to turn the ashes into dust. He uses petrol, because at the time there was a huge difficulty to get rid of these large number of corpses. So he comes up with methods, techniques that are the outcome of his tests. He gets better and better at doing this, such as piling the corpses to make sure his work becomes very effective. And then he's going to also experiment putting the bodies on
on les entrelace de bûches et on les arrose d'un liquide inflammable. Et ça, c'est une variante. Le liquide inflammable peut varier selon les sites de mise à mort et des excavations entreprises par les Sonderkommandos de l'opération 1005. Mais l'entreprise est interrompue, voire abandonnée, pour deux raisons. D'abord parce qu'on est en pleine guerre et puis le vent tourne pour les troupes allemandes. Et pour beaucoup, au sein de l'état-major, même de la SS, on pense que ça n'est pas le moment d'entreprendre des pareils et de mobiliser autant d'hommes.
The Germans think it's not necessary to take over such large operations because it's using up lots of men, and even if they are using Jewish workers, it's still using too many German soldiers, members of the SD, and too many means. And with the upcoming winter, it seems very difficult to excavate the bodies that were buried, and the project is abandoned, but not for very long, because in 1943, 4,000 corpses are found.
C'est absolument pas que c'est le NKVD. L'affaire est médiatisée, ça fait un tollé mondial dans la presse, et les nazis, évidemment, disent que ce n'est pas eux, mais les soviétiques prétendent la même chose, et chacun se renvoie la balle, tout cela ayant pour effet que Hitler
and the people in charge of the final solution see this as an alert. For them, this was a sign that it was becoming urgent to look for the traces of the massacres of the Soviet Union.
La mission que Heydrich avait assignée à Blobel, formant à la hâte un commando qu'il plaça sous son commandement, et c'est le fameux Sonderkommando 1005. À partir de là, c'est véritablement une gigantesque opération qui est entamée. Alors les fosses.
I'm sorry, there was a slight problem with the microphones. So there are a huge number of sites in all of these countries, and the sites are going to be first found, pointed at by the leader of operations, Global. First, the site of Rombula next to Riga, where 100,000 corpses are buried, and about the same number of corpses in Polinari next to Vilnius, same thing in Kaunas in Lithuania, Forneuf, a huge death camp there as well. Same number of corpses again in Piaski, in Lviv, Lvov or Lemberg, depending on the language you use. And again, 150,000 corpses on the Babia site. So these sites are gigantic, and the operations are gigantic as well. This is why they will use the information present in the reports of the Einsatzgruppen in order to smoke out all the corpses that have been buried, in order to destroy all evidence, to get rid of the slightest trace. And the way is to incinerate the corpses, a very large operation using at least an average of 40 Jewish workers on site. When it comes to morphine, I met about all of the people that were present when the operations took place. I'll show you a first extract of my film.
Vous allez entendre un témoin local qui habite toujours ces lieux.
We have a witness that still lives there and who was called Adolf Wysłowski. And immediately after that, you'll see the testimony that one of the Sonderkommando gave during the trial of Adolf Eichmann's Leon of Wales. He's unfortunately now deceased, he passed away, but it shows you the way in which the excavations were taking place and the procedure that were used in order to get rid of the corpses.
Lorsque le front a commencé à basculer vers l'ouest, ils ont de nouveau fait venir un groupe de juifs. Ils étaient entourés de barbelés. On leur a construit un abri et ils sortaient tous les corps de la fosse et les brûlaient. C'était entre l'automne 43 et le début 44. Dans cette forêt, 59 fosses ont été creusées. Plus tard, ils les ont ouvertes pour brûler les cadavres. Cela a duré près de 6 mois. Quand ils faisaient cela, ils continuaient à faire venir des gens pour les fusiller, même si c'était plus rare.
Dr. Wells, please.
What did you have to do?
We used to uncover all the graves that were people killed during the last 3 years, and uncover, take out the bodies, make up pyres, and burn these bodies, grind the bones, pick out all the valuables in the ashes, like gold teeth, rings, and so on, separate them. After grinding the bones, we used to put out the ashes in the air so they disappear, plant over the graves back, seed back plants so nobody can recognize whenever it was their grave.
Yes.
In addition to it, they used to bring new people, new victims. They were shot there, they got undressed there, they were shot there, and we had to burn these new bodies too.
They knew
Ils savaient où se trouvaient les fosses. Ce n'est pas nous qui les avons trouvées. Ils disaient, ici il y a une tombe, ici une autre, et une autre là. Et nous avons rouvert les tombes, déterré les corps. Nous déterrions en moyenne 1000 corps par jour. Et chaque soir, un SS venait au campement. Et nous devions lui donner l'or. Et chaque chose que nous étions censés leur remettre. Puis ils repartaient avec tout ça. Ils venaient tous les soirs, à la tombée de la nuit.
C'était l'horreur. Marcher sur la route alors qu'on assassine. On a du mal à passer à côté d'un abattoir, alors ici où les gens étaient tués. Comment voulez-vous que nous ayons vécu cela? On avait peur qu'à la fin, ils nous mettent tous dans la fosse, parce que nous étions témoins de ce qui s'était passé. Nous vivions au jour le jour. Et lorsqu'ils ont commencé à brûler les corps, quelle puanteur! Car ces cadavres étaient là depuis 2 ou 3 ans. Il régnait une telle puanteur, et la fumée montait si haut, il versait quelque chose là-dessus, que nous allions nous réfugier loin dans les champs.
Alors, au sein des commandos juifs, des Sonderkommandos,
so within the Sonderkommando, the Jewish commandos, everyone had a very clear role. The organization was very clearly defined, and in Leon Wells this is a very incomplete part of his intervention recorded at Adolf Eichmann's trial, but he reminds that in all excavation sites, and this is verified, there was 1 or 2 Brandmeister whose job was to constantly maintain the fire. You had the zeller, the one who had to count the corpses, who was in charge of counting the number of burned corpses that of course had to match the number of listed people killed in the ditch by the Einsatzgruppen. And these processes, these very methodical processes, had to be maintained by the Jewish prisoners themselves. That consisted in placing the bodies with the logs, pouring over an inflammable liquid, and as in Auschwitz they were privileged witnesses of the genocide, and therefore they had to be executed on a regular basis to be replaced. And Leon Wells shows it in his testimony. They were supposed to be shifted around every fortnight, but there seemed to be some complacency by the bosses, not out of compassion for prisoners, but because it became easier to actually not replace them and keep them a bit longer. There were no Jews left, and you had to bring Jewish prisoners all the way from Auschwitz, which is in these counter-offensive times against the Soviets was extremely complicated, and therefore the missions lasted longer, and this is the reason why there were some survivors. So as you will have understood, these excavations were taking place in the middle of the populations, so the local populations very often witnessed them. In extract number 2 you will hear Regina Jablonka, who's from Vilnius and who at the time had a very particular job. She was the cook for those Lithuanians in charge of the executions in the Polnari forest, those mass murderers, because very quickly the Einsatzgruppen, the Germans, passed on or outsourced, if such a term can be used, the killing missions to locals. So she saw what happened. She wasn't, of course, witnessing maybe the executions, but she was making the meals in a small house in the forest, and only a few hundred meters from the execution site. And as of the 1005 operation, she was able to testify the way she perceived the events. And this is what she reports here in this recording in Polnari, Vilnius.
Приходили к нам евреи, которые
Des Juifs venaient nous demander des aliments. Il s'avère que dans la fosse en ciment, ils avaient installé un groupe de travailleurs juifs qui devaient déterrer les corps, les empiler, les arroser d'essence et les brûler. Quelques-uns venaient donc accompagnés de gardes nous demander à manger.
Regina Jablonskaya, qui préparait le repas des tueurs lituaniens en forêt de Ponari, à la sortie de Vilnius, a été témoin des excavations de l'opération 1005, pratiquée dans les fosses de stockage qui ont englouti près de 100 000 personnes. Elle a vu le calvaire des Juifs forcés de déterrer et de brûler les cadavres. Vous saviez ce qu'ils faisaient là-bas?
Bien sûr qu'on le savait.
Comment pouviez-vous le deviner? Ils auraient pu y faire autre chose.
Qu'est-ce qu'ils auraient pu faire d'autre? On les a installés dans la fosse et ils s'occupaient de ça. Ça sentait mauvais. Les flammes montaient très haut. Les gens du village disaient que c'est Ponari qui brûlait. Ce qui se passait était clair. Les gens ne sont pas bêtes.
C'était un travail terrible pour ces Juifs.
Terrible. En plus, ils habitaient dans cette fosse. En arrivant une fois le matin, mon Dieu, quel désordre on a trouvé. On s'est demandé ce qui s'était passé. Il se trouve que pendant la nuit, les Juifs s'étaient évadés. Quand ils déterraient les corps, il restait des richesses sur les cadavres. Certains avaient encore des dents en or, d'autres des bagues. Les Juifs les ramassaient et les donnaient à leurs gardes autrichiens. Par ailleurs, ils avaient creusé un tunnel. Ils transportaient le sable dans leurs poches. C'est pour ça qu'ils payaient les gardes, pour faire ce tunnel. C'est un des survivants qui l'a raconté. Je ne sais pas combien ont été rattrapés et fusillés, mais au bout du compte, seuls 2 ont réussi à s'échapper. Par la suite, l'un d'eux est revenu par chez nous et il nous a tout raconté.
Alors ce que dit Regina Jablonska,
So what Regina Jablonska says here is one of the specificities of what happened there. Everywhere there were evasions and there were rebellions, because in the conquered territories, rebellions seemed to be impossible if the people still had family or relatives locally, because the family would have been hung up, executed. But the workers' commandos didn't have any family around. The ones who didn't have family anymore in 1943, 1944 automatically revolted, and as you heard too, only managed to escape and survive. They are well known. They are Zaiden, Lol, and Dogin. And for weeks, their commando had patiently dug a tunnel that led to the other side of the barbed wire fence they were kept into, and dozens of Jews managed to escape this way. They were all caught or shot, but as I said, 2 managed to escape, and one of them gave this testimony explaining how he managed to escape. He says, we were so exhausted, Dagin says, that the dogs caught us. We thought we would die in their teeth, but suddenly they started screaming. They were petrified. They started lying on the ground. They could smell death on us. Our smell even discouraged the dogs, and they didn't attack us. As I said, all the other members of this group were executed. I wanted to show you another extract, Alex Vitelsson's extract, but I'll skip to number 4. Alex Vitelssson was a Sonderkommando in the furnace number 9 in Karnas, and he managed to escape. He then joined the Belarus resistance, and I had met him in Israel at the end of his life, where I could interview him, but unfortunately, as the 2 Hungarians, he now passed away. It's a long extract, and as we are very late, I will have to skip it. We'll skip directly to extract number 4. This is a recording of a Waffen-SS testimony. Lukas Reiter was in charge of the supervision of excavations, Operation 1005, the Trinets camp in Minsk in Belarus, and this is quite an extraordinary operation because the Soviet soldiers, prisoners, most of them Jews, were in charge of excavating the bodies because there were no Jews left. So there are 100,000 corpses that need to disappear, and there, like in Babia, there is no trace left of the work carried out. It was done all the way to the end until the arrival of Soviet troops. What I'd like to specify, I filmed this guy with a hidden camera, and I quoted his name, which is totally illegal. I lied to him. He's not aware that I filmed him, but he never got back to me. Extract number 4 will be followed or preceded by a very unnerving picture. You will not see any corpse, but you'll be able to see the condition, a very particular image, but you will see this later.
Ces images ont été tournées par un jeune soldat allemand. De retour chez lui, à Breslau, après un an sur le front de l'Est, sa petite sœur lui dit vouloir se débarrasser de ses jouets. Il imagine cette mise en scène et la filme. En Biélorussie, ce sont des prisonniers de guerre soviétiques qui sont chargés de déterrer et de brûler les corps.
Les bombes au phosphore, elles étaient mises dans le bûcher pour que ça brûle mieux. Et tous les cadavres étaient ainsi brûlés. Même les cendres ont été écrasées pour que personne ne puisse y trouver quoi que ce soit. C'est pour ça qu'on n'a jamais rien retrouvé. C'était top secret. Toute la zone était bouclée. Personne ne pouvait y accéder ou en sortir. Tout était bouclé. Nous, on était assis là et on devait surveiller les prisonniers et ceux qui faisaient le travail. Ils étaient libres de leur mouvement puisqu'ils travaillaient là. Et le soir, à une heure déterminée, la journée de travail s'arrêtait. Ils retournaient dans le bunker où ils recevaient un bon repas. Après, nous avons eu recours à une astuce. On leur a dit, vous allez être libérés. Ils devaient signer les papiers de leur libération. Et ensuite, vous savez où on les a amenés?
À l'est?
Non, dans le camion à gaz. Ils ont été liquidés. Il y avait un médecin, un russe. Il m'a dit, jamais on ne sera libéré. Il parlait bien l'allemand. Jamais on ne sera libéré. J'en suis sûr, car avec tout ce que nous savons, il est impossible qu'on nous laisse partir. Ils étaient volontaires pour ce travail. S'ils ne l'avaient pas été, ils seraient déjà morts. Et ces volontaires, parce qu'ils seraient soi-disant relâchés, ont reçu leur déclaration de libération. Puis on leur a fait prendre un bain. Comme ça, au moins, ils étaient propres.
Et ensuite, ils devaient entrer eux-mêmes dans les camions à gaz?
Oui, à la fin, oui. Ils ont dû y aller. Aucun n'a été libéré.
Pour conclure et pour terminer, j'ai fini juste une petite précision.
To conclude and to wrap this up, I have a brief conclusion on the first images that you saw. They're quite unnerving, of course. As the comment briefly says, these pictures were taken by an SD operator. His job was to make pictures and record films of what was going on. And there are very famous pictures he took for himself, actually, in Minsk in the winter of 1941. The hung-up people of Minsk. I think you have all seen these pictures. He took them there, and after filming many executions and filming many mass executions, he came home to Breslau, and this little film that you just saw is, of course, a metaphor of the genocide and says a lot. It's a metaphor of the Operation 1005 with the processing of the corpses, with the pyres, the little teddy bears hanging over the pyre, and this is what reports about the event. And of course, this is also another reason why prisoners were used to carry out these tasks, but many of the soldiers became alcoholic or demented. It's trauma, and this is what this film of what this young German soldier does clearly shows. Thank you.